In life, it can feel like you're trying to break the board, and it just doesn't break. And there's this tendency to want to walk away, to want to give in, to want to give up. But there's the next board. And you just never really know what that next board is going to hold for you, what that next board is going to have, if you can finally get that breakthrough that you're looking for, that you're so desiring. And what I have found is that many people, we get so caught up in the boards that aren't breaking that we don't know what's right around the corner, and so we give up. And so we kind of get this mindset of, it seems like the unemployment's never going to end, the illness that our child have is never going to improve, that the relationship with our husband or wife isn't going to get better because it's not, that the debt isn't going to finally start decreasing, instead it keeps increasing, and it's just like we're trying to break the board, and it just doesn't happen, and we don't know what that next board has to hold for us. And often we'll say things like this, that I can't do anything right. We'll say statements like that while we're trying to break the board, when we're trying to get the breakthrough. We'll say things like, I am a failure. We'll say things like, I'll never stop, and then you can fill in the blank. I'll never stop. Whatever the addiction, whatever the unhealthy habit is, and then we'll say something along the lines of, I want to give up. What I have found is that when we get to a place where we say things like this, is that we need two people in our life. We need two people in our life. One person was what we might call the Mr. Rogers. He's the person with the warm smile, the gentle tone, the awesome red sweater. That's the kind of person that you just need in your life, that's going to offer you compassion, empathy, encouragement to keep going. We need this kind of person in our life. It's been my experience that nearly all of us have this person. We may want more of these people in our life, but we always have at least one or two people that are like this. Generally, it's somebody in our family, or maybe it's a close friend. We all have a Mr. Rogers type of person in our life that we can go to when we're having a tough time, when we're trying to get the breakthrough. But what I've also found is that we need this other type of person that most of us don't have. And this is what we'll call the William Wallace kind of person. Not the person with the red sweater, but the blue face. He's the kind of person who's going to come into our life, grab us by the shoulders, shake us a little bit, growl at us maybe, and he'll say things along the lines of, or she'll say things along the lines of, this is not the time to give up and go home. It's time to fight. Don't you dare back down. I know it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Don't quit. Often, we don't have that kind of a person in our lives, and we need to have people like that in our lives. I believe that this is a bit of the approach that the writer of Hebrews is taking. That there's certainly empathy that this writer has probably shown to these people. There's no doubt that they have people like that in their lives. These Hebrews who are struggling, their faith is cold, they're thinking about giving up, they're dealing with societal pressures that are coming against them because they believe in Jesus. And so they're wanting to back down, to back up, and it seems as though the writer of Hebrews he's grabbing them by the shoulders, so to speak, and he's shaking them and he's saying, don't do that. And this is what he says in Hebrews chapter 12. He says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, and we talked about that last week, that this is the cloud is a crowd of those who have gone on before. In Hebrews chapter 11, this great list of people who've lived by faith. Let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. And so as we look through this, what we have to ask ourselves is a little bit of what it is that this writer of Hebrews is encouraging us to do to keep us in the race. Like, he's not just saying, don't give up, keep going, grit your teeth. He's given us some pretty practical advice too. He says, first of all, he says, throw off. Now, this is a compound Greek word, and this word throw off, it literally means to lay something down, to push it beyond reach. To get it away from you, whatever that thing may be, to get it away from you so you don't succumb to that thing again that's going to cause you to give up. See, we don't think about it like that. We don't think about the things that are causing us to give up. They aren't just things that are around us. Often they're things that are on us, that are a part of our lives, that are wearing us down, wearing us out. We need to get these things away from us, get them out of our reach. You see, this coming Wednesday, we have the trick-or-treat street that's going to be happening here at the church. And again, Short lines, lots of candy, warm building. It's going to be a cold night. So if you got kiddos, bring them out. But many of you have been really good about bringing in candy to us here at the church, and so you drop them off in the bins. Well, a couple weeks ago, they were just getting dropped off in the bins, and they weren't getting put anywhere. Well, that's just not good for me. And so I might have something in mind, a place that I'm going, and I'm walking, but when I see a bag of candy on the ground, like with the fruit chews, those colorful little fruit chews, I mean, that's just too much for me to handle. And so I'm walking by. I'm not sure exactly what happens. I black out. Next thing I know, I got a handful of candy and a bag that's ripped open. And it's just not good. And then 30 minutes later, I've got a stomach ache. And I just wish it wouldn't have ever happened. So what do we do with the candy? Well, somebody started wandering around and noticed that there were bags of candy open. And so we take the candy and we stick them in an office upstairs and we lock the door. We push them out of reach. We get them away from us because I'm just going to keep eating the candy if we didn't do that. And that wouldn't have been good for anybody. But that's the idea that we're talking about here. That these things that you need to throw off in your life that weigh you down, that cause you to struggle, that are hindering you, that are entangling you, you got to get them out of reach. You got to get them away from you so that way you just can't easily go to them. And so what that means is maybe you need to delete some phone numbers in your phone because you got some people that you can call, that you can go do some things with that you shouldn't do. And it's called preventative maintenance. You need to get those people out of your life. It's called putting certain softwares on your devices so that way you don't go and look at things that you shouldn't look at on the internet, things that are going to hinder you, things that are going to entangle you. It's what you mean by getting rid of credit cards that are driving up your debt. You see, this all I'm talking about is preventative maintenance here. That's all I'm saying. You got to get it out of reach. You got to get it you can't just have it sitting in your lap and expect everything to go okay. You got to get it away from yourself. You got to lock it away in a room. It's when you want to avoid, you want to get divorce out of your reach. And so what do? You put things in your life like date nights and little vacations and getaways and time that you can communicate with one another. That's what we're talking about here. That's what he's saying, that you got to get rid of these things that cause these things that you just need to throw off. Now, the other word that he uses here is hinder. And this word hinder, it actually implies that a weight, any kind of a weight that slows you down. It's something that can be on you. It's something that's keeping you from running forward. In the New Living Translation, it translates that first verse this way. It says, "Let us strip off every weight that slows us down." Now, in this particular culture in which this was written, the letter of Hebrews, the Greeks were well known. The Olympics, the Greeks created the Olympics. You know this, right? The Greeks created the Olympics for us. It's this incredible thing. And so what they would do, the Greeks, when they were running their races, that they would strip off all of the weight that would slow them down. Here is a picture of this, and you have no idea how hard it was to get an appropriate picture of a Greek running, because they didn't wear anything. They were completely naked. And so thankfully, the Olympics have stayed with us to this day, and we see them every 2 to 4 years, depending on if it's winter or summer. We get to observe them and watch that and celebrate what it is that our country's doing. But thankfully also that they have decided to wear clothes. And so I think that we would all agree that the 0.0002 seconds that some spandex adds to your time is completely acceptable and appropriate. But a serious runner strips off all of the weight that might hinder them, all of the weight that might slow them down. Now, a casual runner, what do? Well, that's like maybe you or me, and we run around, we have hats and water bottles and phones, and if it's cold outside, we'll have a couple layers of clothes on. We're not worried about making time. We're just kind of just plodding along, and that's even if we go out and do it, because if we're a casual runner, it's cold, we probably aren't going to go run at all. We like to run when it's easy, when it's convenient, when it's comfortable. That's probably what's wrong with most Christians. It's probably what's wrong with me from time to time, is I'll be more of a casual Christian. And I'll hang on to the things that are slowing me down, the things that are keeping me from running the race that's really been marked out for me. And what we don't realize is as we keep these things in our life, we think that we can handle them. We think that we can absorb whatever it is that they are bringing into our lives. We think that we can do that. But I like the way that my friend Kyle, he says it. He says this of these things that will weigh us down. He says, carrying anything extra will slow you down. We agree with that. But if you keep carrying it long enough, you'll reach a point that you can't keep going. And so we have to be willing to throw off. And this idea of throwing something off is when there is a weight that is on you, and so you got to get it off your shoulders, get it off your back, get it out of your life. And so what are these weights that we need to release? What are these weights that we need to get rid of? What weights do you have right now in your life that you need to throw off? That you need to put some preventative maintenance in place? That you need to identify that's really slowing you down, that you aren't sure if you can keep going if that thing stays in your life? Well, there are many things that we can list. I'm going to give you two that I think that the text takes us to. The first one is the weight of individualism and self-sufficiency. You see, they opened up Hebrews chapter 12 by simply saying, we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, a crowd. In other words, there are people that are meant to be in our lives, that are meant to encourage us along, that are meant to help us keep going. The key truth that we need to hang on to in regards to this weight, if we're going to throw this weight off, is that we have to buy into this key truth, is that we have to recognize that you need God and others to run your race. That's the thing that we have to throw off. That's the thing that we have to throw off the weight of individualism and self-sufficiency, and then we have to take on the truth of the fact that we need God and that we need others in our race to run this race. About 2 years ago, I ran the backcountry half marathon, and it was one of those races that I was in decent shape, and so I felt like I could do it. I was in good enough shape that I could go run this marathon. I didn't necessarily train for it overly, not the way that I should have trained for it. Specifically, I wasn't doing much trail running, and this is a picture of me after the race, so I did survive, as you can obviously tell now. But I made it through the race. I was still standing, but it was hard. And so as we were setting out on this race, on race day, Laura and the kids, we talked about where they could be positioned along the race to help me or to meet me or to encourage me along. And so about 3 miles in, after climbing a big hill, there they were. And it was so fun coming up on them and seeing them. And so I kind of got pepped up when I saw them. And then I was excited to give them a hug. And then I was excited when I ran off. That carried me on for probably a good another mile or so. But a half marathon is 13 miles. I mean, it's a long way to go. But we weren't familiar enough with the trail, and so I didn't have them positioned at other spots where I wish that they would have been positioned when it was getting hard again. But there were other people along the trail that were kind of guiding us and helping us to know which way to go and which direction to head in. And there were people positioned along the trail that would give you some water, maybe give you an orange or something like that to give you a little energy to keep you going. And I made a commitment when I ran this race. I made a commitment, like, whatever happens, I am not going to walk. And so sure enough, I never walked, but towards the end of it, I just felt like my knee was about to explode. Again, that's what trail running does to you if you're not ready for trail running. It just is going to make you hurt. And I'm pretty sure if I would have started walking, I would have gone faster than however fast I was running, because it was pretty slow, that last mile and a half. My point is, though, is I needed people along that race to encourage me along, to keep me going. And I made it through it. And my guess is many of you, maybe most of you, when you get worn down, you're going to slow down a lot. But probably, like me, you won't totally give up. You won't totally give in. It'll be awful. It'll be terrible. You will make it, though. And here's my point. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. That if we're willing to allow people to come into our lives, to not just run this race by ourselves, the race that's marked out for us, and we all have a part to play in the grand plan that is God's. If we're allowing people to come into our lives to keep us on track, to encourage us along the way, then that'll make that race a whole lot easier than it would be otherwise. Is that making sense? You need people in your life. And that's one of the things that we're going to be emphasizing more and more as we go forward as a church, is just the importance of being a part of a group. And we've got 3 groups that are starting up here. We got one in Roxborough that's for some people, that maybe some families. If you would like to jump in that group, you can let me know, and I'll get you connected with the person that's leading it. We got another group that's starting up in Highlands Ranch that's going to be more catered towards parents with kids that are 9, 10 years old and older, as they're trying to wrestle through and figure out what it means to raise a teenager. And so that's what that group's kind of about. They'll talk about a lot of things, but they're going to be there as a support group for those that are raising teenagers. And whether you're a grandparent raising a teenager, you're a parent raising a teenager, maybe this would be a great group for you. And then we've got another group in Highlands Ranch that's just starting up for just about anybody. And we'd love to have you jump into some of those groups, Because it's just good to have people that you're living life with, that you're running the race with. So we need people in our life to help us run the race, but we also need God in our life to help us run the race. Jesus said these words in John 15. He said, I am the true vine. And why did he say true? Because there are false vines that are out there. There are counterfeit vines. There are vines that we can attach ourselves to, and we expect them to give us life, but they won't. You are the branches, he says. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. A good illustration of this is this. It's called the Grapevine. It's in London. It's over 1,000 years old. There are branches that are attached to the Grapevine in London that are over 200 feet long. They still produce fruit. And why is that? Because they're attached to a life-giving source. And that's what Jesus provides for all of us. Those of us that would have our faith in him, that would place our faith in him, he is this life-giving source that will help you to keep running the race, and not just running the race, not just barely getting by, but he'll keep you producing fruit. No matter how far you go, no matter how long you've been running, 200 years this vine, or 200 feet the vine is, 200 feet the branch is, 1,000 years old the vine is, and it's still going strong because it's attached to the right life source. And so we have to throw off the weight of individualism and self-sufficiency, and we have to attach ourselves to God. We have to attach ourselves to others to run the race that's been marked out for us. I love how Isaiah chapter 40 puts it this way. He gives strength to the weary. And my guess is some of you are tired. My guess is some of you are worn down. And he increases the power of the weak. I mean, who else can give that promise? Who else does give that promise? And always comes through. Only God. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. He's saying that even the people who are the strongest amongst you will need help, but those who hope in the Lord will always renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. The second weight that we have to throw off is the weight of guilt and of shame. And as I wrestle at times with guilt and shame in my own life, it's when I do things I shouldn't do, say things I shouldn't say, see things I shouldn't see, when I'm thinking things that I shouldn't think. Whenever those things are part of my life, there's a lot of weight that comes with that. I think most of us have experienced that. Most of us have gone through that. I thought of the disciples as I was thinking about this for myself. There's a verse in Matthew chapter 25, verse 26. It says this, then all the disciples deserted him and fled. This is when Jesus was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's being taken away to the Sanhedrin. Ultimately, he's going to be led to a cross. And it's in this moment that all the disciples, all of them, they gave up. They ran away. And sometimes the guilt and the shame because of bad decisions, because of things that we do, because of things that we're wrestling with, can cause us to want to give up, cause us to want to give in, right? It does that. And I think that they all but would have given up and given in, except that even when they were faithless, he still remained faithful. This is what 2 Timothy says, that if we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot disown himself. And so while the disciples were running away from Jesus, Jesus was running to the cross. While they were running to save themselves, Jesus was running and moving and going forward to save them. That he was the one that didn't deny them. He was the one that didn't run from the cross. He was the one that didn't run from his torture. He was the one that didn't run from a rejection or abandonment. Let me say it this way and hang on to this. That even when they gave up on him, Jesus never gave up on them. The key truth that you have to embrace in order to throw that weight of guilt and shame off is this, is that you have to recognize that Jesus, he hasn't given up on you. And he never will. He's always going to be waiting for you to come back to him, like the father in the story of the prodigal son. I like how Peter puts it in 1 Peter chapter 5. He says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Whatever that guilt, whatever that shame, whatever that anxiousness is, just cast it on him. Now, when you hear the word cast from a fisherman, you think like you throw out the lure, it comes back to you. I mean, that doesn't really help us with our anxieties and our guilt and our shame, right? We don't want it coming back. We want it to just go away. Well, that's not, thankfully, that's not what he's saying when he says cast here. The idea of cast is this idea of transfer. It's a transferring over of what it is that is weighing you down. that you don't have to carry it anymore, that you can just give it over to him. The Boston Marathon has a hill that's known as Heartbreak Hill. And this nice person is drawing a big heart to remind the people of the hill that they're getting ready to climb and how hard it's going to be. Even world-class runners have trouble with this hill. It hits them at the 19-mile mark. It's when the glycogen is completely ran out in your muscles, and there's lactic acid that is there, and your muscles are just crying out for oxygen. It feels like your body's about to die. But in this race, most make it through. Many make it through. And in the Christian walk, though, they make it through on their own power. In the Christian walk, though, when you hit the heartbreak hill of your life, and in the Christian world, in the Christian life, we will hit many heartbreak hills. We will run into an illness, and we'll run into debt, and we'll run into doubt. We'll run into questions that we don't seem like we can answer. We'll run into situations that just never seem to resolve themselves. We'll run into people that treat us unfair. We'll run into situations that are completely out of bounds that we don't even know how to handle because they're so crazy. When you run into those heartbreak hills, here's the beauty. You don't have to run the race alone anymore. You don't have to run the race without God. That instead, he'll give you a supernatural power. He'll lift you up. He'll push you through. He'll get you to the end if you're willing to lean on him and trust in him. You don't have to carry the guilt and shame anymore that wears you down. You don't have to carry the weight of doing it all on your own and gritting through it. Many of you I know can do that, but you don't have to do that anymore. And so the challenge for us then is as we come into these heartbreak hills, as we come into these struggles, as we hit these walls, these boards that just don't seem to break, is that we got to press through. And just trust and have faith that, you know what, the next board is going to be the one that's going to be the breakthrough that we're so desiring. The next board is going to be the one that's going to be that breakthrough that we've been wanting for so long. My encouragement again for you is to don't stop. That while the series that we're in is going to stop, that you wouldn't stop, that you would lean more and more into God and allow him to be your true vine. Let's pray. Thank you, Father, for this morning. And thank you for your word. And Lord, I pray that your spirit would grab a hold of our shoulders, that you would just speak into our hearts. Don't give up, don't give in, don't step back, step in. Lord, help us to keep running this race. And while we may be halfway up that heartbreak hill right now, Lord, we pray that you would just empower us to fly, to soar, to run the race that you've marked out for us for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.